Ready, set, hut.
Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss Dynasty strategy, rankings, and all things NFL. So get ready to geek out on fantasy football with your host, Rich Dotson.
And welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Rich Dotson.
And I'm Matt O'Hara.
And I'm Garrett Price.
And currently we're on Zoom. This is a Zoom podcast. And next week's podcast will be a Zoom podcast as well. And hopefully the podcaster of that, we won't be in Zoom, but we'll find out. Today we are wrapping up our rookie content altogether as our film breakdowns, at least from that standpoint. We got a lot of work to go because a lot of things are going to change here after NFL draft, which comes up 1 week from this Thursday. So the plan is to record a show this Sunday before the NFL draft. We have some team people going to the NFL draft and got some meetings going on there. So what we're going to do is on Sunday, record our pre-NFL draft mock draft for the regular show. And then we're going to do our top 36 rankings consensus between the three of us before the NFL draft. And you got to remember that's important as well, because these rankings will be based off the merit of their college play and the upside for their fantasy football potential. And then after the NFL draft, of course, all of this will change. Some of these guys will rise. Some of these guys will drop. But we'll find out a little over a week. And remember, the day after the NFL draft, we're going to record our regular show early. That should come out probably either Monday or Tuesday at the latest to get you guys all that information prior to your rookie drafts as well. So make sure to get that out to there. And today, we're going to talk about, like I said, the receivers, our final group of receivers, some really high upside guys here. And of course, some guys are just straight turd Ferguson, but hey, they all can't be great, right? So
got to talk about all of them. Yep.
We got to talk all of them about them. If you're on YouTube and you're wondering what happened to my nose, pretty much walked into a garage door that was about nose level. And I walked into it pretty briskly. So
that's what happens when you text and walk around. Yeah, you can't text and walk anymore.
I was like, I could be Jaylen Waddle too, right into the garage. I'm doing good. No, nothing's broken. Just a little scrape, to be honest with you. That looks terrible.
Cut me, Mick. Cut me.
So before we get into this show, let's talk about one of our great sponsors, and that's Dynasty Depot. That's right, dynastydepot.com. You got to get over to dynastydepot.com right now. Use that promo code NERDS. What is that promo code going to get you? It's going to get you their yearly package, a deep discount for $14.99 a year. And you're like, $14.99, Rich, what am I getting for $14.99? Well, you're going to get an opportunity to buy and sell FFPC Dynasty teams like you're on eBay at your leisure. This is going to give you an opportunity. Remember, after this NFL draft, your rookie drafts are going to come up, and then we have months of nothing to do. Why don't you buy some new Dynasty teams that you can restructure, rearrange, and make and sell them for profit, or just play them out and win leagues over many years. FFP is a great platform to host all your Dynasty fantasy football leagues, and Dynasty Depot is going to give you an opportunity to buy as many of those or sell as many as you want or profit. You can flip Dynasty teams, you can buy Dynasty teams, and they also put you in a good position to win a lot of good prizes. Throughout the regular season, they have a big leaderboard that's going to put you in position to play in the FFPC championship, which is going to give you an opportunity to play for a $500,000 prize if you draft a good enough team. It doesn't matter what your stakes are. If you want to buy a $75 team or an $1,100 team, Dynasty Depot's got the teams for you. Get out there, check out the teams. Remember, you don't have to sign up to look at these teams. You can look at the teams that are available and then sign up. Or you could be like, hey, I can draft better than all these teams. Let me sign up at FFPC. Let me draft a team. I'm going to put a team on Dynasty Depot, and I'm going to make a couple bucks. You're going to love it. I love it. I know the fellows love it too. Get to dynastydepot.com right now. Use that promo code NERDS and get yourself some cash in that pocket for being such an awesome Dynasty drafter. All right, guys, let's get into our final group of rookie wide receivers. And there's not a better guy to break off this chain of awesomeness than Jaylen Waddle, wide receiver out of Alabama, 5'9", 180 pounds. And if you're looking for a guy in this draft who offers the highest ceiling for fantasy football production, it's Jaylen Waddle. There's nothing I like more than watching players that play football in general that look like they're just different species of human beings, because that's what Jaylen Waddle is. This guy gets the ball in his hands and he has speed that's on a different level. Just like Henry Ruggs, Tyreek Hill, they get the ball and they're running, everybody else is chasing them. But what's different about Jaylen Waddle too is this is a guy that has good route run ability. He has great vision. This is a guy who 11 of his 20 touchdowns went for 50 yards. This is a guy, when he gets off the line, defensive backs are immediately on their toes and wonder what they're going to do. Like I said, runs really good routes. He gets in and out of his breaks so quickly, so smooth. We'll play over the middle field. He'll go up. He'll get the ball. I mean, he's just absolutely dynamic when it comes to being a fantasy football wide receiver. Because remember, we're looking for guys that could take the top off and offer big time production, because big time production equals fantasy football production. And to me, Jaylen Waddle seems to me, he comes in as my wide receiver 3 because other guys are just more premier, hands route runner receivers. But I can easily see Jaylen Waddle end up being the number 1 fantasy producer over the next 5 years for what he brings to the table. I mean, he's absolutely electric in the kick return game, at the receiver, end arounds, quick slants, deep routes, over the middle. I mean, he's electric in all 3 levels of the field. And for me, I really like Jaylen Waddle. I have a couple of things before you guys get in your takes that I didn't like about Jaylen Waddle, which is there's not really a whole lot. I know he's coming off that ankle injury, but he did come back for the national championship game. He sometimes makes a couple body catches that I don't love, because I mentioned how I'm not a big time body catcher guy. And what I also saw was, like, for a guy that's so fast, like his lateral quickness, like his lateral agility, isn't as dynamic as an overall player. But besides that, I'm trying being like really nitpicky here with Jaylen Waddle, because for a guy with his speed, you don't expect him to be such a solid route runner with such solid hands. But he to me really is the whole package. If he was the number 1 receiver, I don't think he would be, but if he was the number 1 receiver off the board in this upcoming Thursday NFL draft, it would not blow my mind at all.
I mean, I don't think it would blow my mind. He does offer such an explosive element to his game that I think NFL teams in general just gonna drool over that facet of his game. But like you said, I think there are some things he needs to work on. I mean, I think he could clean up his routes and become a little bit more diverse in some of the things he does from just a strictly route running standpoint. And I think you kind of nailed it with the lateral agility. I mean, I think he's very explosive in and out of cuts, but he's not one of these guys that's going to be making guys miss, like juke them out of their shoes. I think in the open field, he's going to outrun most guys at the boundary. And I think that's how he wins in the open field for the most part. But like you said, there's not a lot to dislike about him. So, I mean, saying those things, it is very nitpicky. As of now, I think he's going to be my 3rd, 4th at the very lowest by the time, the draft rolls around, wide receiver in this draft. So there's not a lot to not like. I think, contested catch is probably one of the things that I saw him kind of struggle with when there was guys around him. I saw him drop. I marked it down in the opportunities that I saw. He dropped. I only saw him. Yeah, he dropped 2 out of 5 passes. So it's not like horrible. But it was the 2 that he dropped, I think he really should have caught, and he didn't. So that's, like I said, being very nitpicky. But lots to like about Jaylen Waddle.
Jaylen's going to get a lot of comps to Henry Ruggs because they played at the same school. They played around the same time. They're both speed demons. The thing I like, and this is something I mentioned to Rich when we were first starting to talk about these prospects, is if you like Henry Ruggs, which I know Rich was a huge fan of Henry Ruggs last year, Jaylen Waddle does all of the things that Ruggs does, just better. I think, one of the issues that we had with Henry Ruggs last year is there was almost no lateral agility. Part of the reason Jaylen Waddle was so good on punt returns is he could I think you're right in saying like he doesn't have elite lateral agility, but he is going to make guys miss, and he's very decisive when he puts his foot in the ground, and he's able to find angles much better. I think had that more open field vision, planning for the next phase of what's going on in front of him a lot better than we saw from Henry Ruggs. I do think he can go up and get the ball a little bit better as well, and even even in situations, he plays a lot from the slot, but even for when he's from the outside, which he didn't do very often, but it wasn't like, he was getting jammed a ton. I don't think he has the biggest catch radius overall, and I don't think he's a super physical player. So those things are something you would expect, though, from somebody that's not the biggest player on the field. So overall, he ended up coming in as my wide receiver 5. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, 4. Wide receiver 4. And he ended up with a 77.9 with my nerd score there.
Who's the other receiver, Jared, besides Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith?
I have Rashad Bateman just a hair above.
Okay. And that's fair. I mean, Bateman's definitely like the safest player. He's like one of the safer receivers in this class. I won't argue that. But
and then for me, Elijah Moore is like right there. Like their scores, we'll talk about him next episode, but 77.9.
Locked in at my wide receiver 5, and I would have no problem taking him above Bateman. I wouldn't as of today. Let's see where the land spots are. But yeah, we're gonna talk about it next episode. I mean, I absolutely love Elijah Moore's game.
And he was the one, and he was the person I was talking to when I said Jaylen Waddle is 3 or maybe 4. It was flip-flopping between those two players.
Yeah, but this is Matt's first time actually digging into Elijah Moore. Like we've been talking about him for a couple of weeks now. Matt, this is his first chance to get into him.
So make sure you watch the Nerd Herd episode so you hear all about him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned his vision, Jaylen Waddle's vision. I absolutely love his vision. I mean, that's why he was a solid punt returner too. I mean, he averaged 19.3 yards per return. I think we had a couple of touchdowns there for Alabama as well. The one where he got like sprung around and he went backwards, but then ran away all the way upfield was great. This is guy's just tremendous. I love his vision. I love the way he gets off the line so quickly. You mentioned the slot. I can easily see him playing outside. And you're right. He's only 5'9", 180 pounds. So he's not going to be the most physical receiver, but I don't need him to be because, most defensive backs in the NFL aren't big defensive backs anyways. And what he's always going to win at is going to be his speed. His fantasy production, he's got good enough hands and he's got the speed that's going to offer that fantasy football production. This guy is going to be good enough to get you like he's going to average 80 yards a game, even if he gets 3 catches. You know what I mean? Like he's the kind of guy that's going to give you double-digit points week in and week out. I mean, there's not a lot like from a fantasy football aspect, which is what we really care about here. I mean, he can make your mouth drool with the potential they could bring. You hear a lot of people that like I trust, like Jared Wackerly, Michael Liu, Ray Garvin. They say this is the closest comp you're going to get to Tyreek Hill coming into the NFL. And a lot of people will say, oh, they have Tyreek Hill potential, but that's a fallacy. Matt, you talk about it all the time. Like nobody has the quick feet to be able to get off the line like a guy like Tyreek Hill has.
And that's the thing.
Waddle does get off the line well.
He gets off the line really well. I just don't think he's as laterally explosive as Tyreek Hill. And that's, I think, where the difference between a guy like Tyreek Hill and pretty much everyone else.
It is funny, too, when you see a lot of those comps because Tyreek Hill was a running back. Like we weren't even able to evaluate him as like a college prospect at wide receiver for the most part. So like he was just such a hard guy to even know what he was. The whole situation with him was a real anomaly.
And I think if if we're staying with the running back analogy, Jaylen Waddle is like a one cut and go type of runner, where Tyreek Hill can make people miss in the open field and string together multiple moves and go. You know what I mean? Like that's where the difference in these two players I think lies.
But again, that's what we said close because we didn't say equal to Tyreek Hill because Tyreek Hill is literally one of a kind, an elite 26-year-old asset to be 27 this year in the Dynasty game. Top 5 Dynasty raw receiver. And hopefully maybe we'll be talking about Jaylen Waddle in that same context here in about 3 to 4 years. Really excited to see where he ends up and what scheme he's going to end up in. I don't want to see, but you know what? We always talk about all these receivers that can go to Baltimore, like, oh, he went to Baltimore, bump him down. I think Jaylen Waddle, even though he won't be there for Baltimore, I think even Jaylen Waddle in Baltimore scheme, like I can live with some short intermediate passes to get the ball in his hand, open the game up, Lamar Jackson on the run on the outside. But I mean, Jaylen Waddle to me, I don't really see a scheme where I don't love him in. You know what I mean? No,
but I think there are schemes that will play to his strengths, a more creative scheme, somebody that can get him out in space and get him the ball quickly and stuff like that. Like you mentioned, I'm just not sure if Baltimore's the volume that he would need in order to be fantasy relevant, just because they just don't throw the ball enough. They just want to run.
Volume, I guess, is the number one.
Right.
Point there. But I mean, Waddle's expected to go top 15. So he's not going to go anywhere. Like we're not looking at Green Bay we're not looking at Baltimore anyways. We're going to be looking at these teams that are a little bit higher up in the draft. But again, I mean, even a team like, Miami, where he could see, like you mentioned, at the targets that he could see there, that'd be a bump for him, just the amount of targets he would see early on with Tua Tagovailoa, Preston Williams, Mike Gesicki.
Who?
I think there was an extra Ola in there.
I'm not very good at speaking, so I do this podcast. We hear how bad I am at talking. Part-time living.
Oh, man. But yeah, I do. I like Waddle. He was a guy that the more I watched him too, the more he grew on me because I tend to not like smaller receivers that are speed guys. So they tend to fall down my board more often than not, just because typically the nature of those guys are, 25-point week, 4-point week, 30-point week, 6-point week, like that's kind of their nature. I do think he has enough abilities outside of his speed to be able to be more consistent than your average deep threat.
And he can win at multiple levels too.
Yep.
So I think he can be involved in the passing game more than just get this guy the ball out of the slot really quickly or get the ball long to him. Like he's not one or the other. He can do both.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I can see him winning at all three levels. I mean, the deep ball, like he tracks the ball well, he adjusts to the ball well. He's not afraid to go up and get the football whatsoever. Nope. This is a guy that will, I really like the way he plays wide receiver for a guy who's so fast. You don't see a lot, like you mentioned, Garrett, like you don't see a lot of guys that bring so much to the table that have this kind of speed. A lot of them are very one-dimensional. Exactly. And Jaylen Waddle, for a guy of his size and his speed, is very well-rounded for a prospect, which is why he'll go very high in this NFL draft.
Yep.
So, guys, Jaylen Waddle averaged a career 9.8 yards after catch per reception, which was most among all Power 5 wide receivers since 2014.
Wow.
That doesn't shock me whatsoever. He's just so dynamic. Like I said earlier, I mean, the guy had he had 20 career touchdowns that went for over 50 yards, 20 career touchdowns over 50 yards.
Most receivers are happy to have 20 career touchdowns.
I'm sorry, 11 of his 20 career touchdowns went for 50 plus yards. It's just, I mean, he's just a dynamic, explosive weapon.
Cool.
Let's move on. Next guy.
Yep.
Let's talk about Terrace Marshall out of LSU. Another big time prospect at a big time school, 6'2.5", 205 pounds. And you're talking about a guy who, coming out of high school, was the number one receiving prospect in the country. So, coming back to all you Debbie guys, Garrett, this guy coming out of high school was a big time prospect. He's another guy that opted out at the end of November this year, so he didn't play the full year. He wanted to get out of there. But when I watched Terrace Marshall, I came away pleasantly surprised. I currently have him in my first round of 1 QB rankings. I do like his upside. I really like his speed. I like his size. This is a guy who averaged 104.4 yards per game last year. Ran a very good route tree for me. I mean, again, a guy who attacks the football field, could play at all three levels and make plays. Tracks the ball really well for a guy of his size. I liked his route running. His feet were pretty quick. I liked what he did there. Could play in the slot, play on the outside as well for LSU, kind of like how they use Justin Jefferson on the slot, and they'll use him on the outside there as well. Pretty tough after the catch as well. For a guy who's 6'2.5", 6'3", 200 pounds, you expect a guy to play physical, and he does give that, because we do have some receivers we're going to talk about later that are big that do not play physical whatsoever.
That's true.
Now, even though he's tough and physical after the catch, I mean, forget about Terrace Marshall in the run game. I wanted to watch him try to run block, and I felt like I could run block better than that. And I showed my garage door that this Monday as well. So I showed what my abilities could be. I didn't like for a guy who's almost 6'3", that were like the defensive back was able to kind of like sometimes get him off his route. Like a physical DB was kind of able to like slow him down a little bit. I just seemed a little bit better there. Maybe use his hands a little bit more. Also, for a guy again who's big and he plays physical, he didn't break a ton of tackles as well out in the open field. Had a couple drops there, but overall, I think he offers some really good upside. I think some of those drops are focus drops, and I think there's some things he can clean up in his routes, like sometimes get a little fancy with his get a little fancy dancing out there. But overall, as a prospect, I think Terrace Marshall is a first-round prospect in Dynasty rookie drafts. I think he offers really good upside. He offers some good pedigree as well. Real interested to see where he goes in this NFL draft. I can see him being a second rounder, seeing what situation he's going to land in. This is a guy I could easily see landed in the right spot to see a big boost in his Dynasty stock.
Yeah, so Terrace Marshall, he's an interesting guy. I think you nailed it. I think he's got a lot of potential. I think his hands were a bit unreliable, and that was the biggest thing that I saw on tape that bugged me. But they did seem to be concentration type of issues because he would make difficult catches, and then it would be like the easy ones kind of close to the line of scrimmage. He's running a slant or he's running a crossing pattern, and he's just dropping those kind of passes, which to me, I mean, there's bodies around you. You're kind of turning your head before you get the ball, and you just make the drop. So hopefully that's something he can get cleaned up. But some of the other things, I mean, he at times, I think, ran really nice routes, and other times they didn't look great. So this is, again, the theme with him seems to be inconsistency. The good is very good, and I like what I see. And I see a lot of upside and potential, probably, why he was the number one recruit, the number one wide receiver that year. But maybe the inconsistency is why he never kind of flourished and blossomed and kind of passed some of these other wide receivers on the depth chart. It kind of took some of these other guys leaving for him to get his chance this past season. And he did. He led the team, 48 receptions, 731 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns, despite the fact that he missed a game with injury, and then he opted out of the final 2 games. So there's still a lot of upside, and the quarterback play obviously dropped off, this past season as well. So I don't know if, all of that wrapped up kind of goes into a mindset where a wide receiver kind of checks out here and there when you've been on this amazing team, you've been on this high powered offense, and then all of a sudden, like, everyone's gone. You're the last piece of it.
You saw some of that too on his 2020 tape. There'd be times where he would look like, dude, like what's going, like Jamar opted out. Everybody's gone here.
Right.
Quarterback's not played. Like there's times he did seem like he was like, I'm just not as interested in being here. I'm probably going to opt out in November, and it's October 31st.
That's exactly. So I like the good that I've seen out of him. I feel like I don't like the fact that he thought like that, but I think that is what I saw on tape anyway, and that kind of explains what I saw, some of the inconsistencies I saw. But only time will tell. I do have him fairly high just based off his upside and kind of a lack of liking anyone else in this class.
No, I'm a little bit lower than you guys are on Terrace Marshall. I currently have him at a 73.15 for my nerd score, which puts him as wide receiver 11. And that's behind guys like Amon-Ra, Kadarius Toney, Austin Watkins, Amari Rodgers. So I think he's a good player. But when I look through my scores, there's no area where I'm like, this is where he consistently wins. Like, this is the area where he just dominates. I think he has good speed. He tested really well. The LSU pro day was a little iffy, but you can see it on tape. He has good speed, but there's not a lot of bend in his game. He's kind of stiff, gets off the line pretty well. You guys,
Williams or Terrace Marshall?
What's that?
We're talking about Seth Williams or Terrace Marshall?
We'll get to Williams.
I'm just making sure.
There's some similarities.
Reading my notes about Seth Williams all of a sudden, so I understand why you're down a little bit around the wide receiver 11. But go ahead.
He has a pretty good catch radius, but you guys are right. His hands are inconsistent. You'll see some really nice catches and then some just oops. So there's just not that one thing that I can point to that I'm like, oh, he's really great after the catch. Not really. He tracks the ball incredibly well and has this amazing catch radius. He's fine. And I think that's just where I came out, is I think he's a good prospect. He's not overly quick. He doesn't have for having pretty good top end speed, not a super bursty player. He's just fine to me.
Yeah, I think in today's NFL, you can live in fine. We see it every year now with teams, giving us 2 wide receiver ones from the same team, right? I mean, we had 2 running back one from the same team last year.
Sure.
We're seeing a lot more of high-end receivers be on the same team. And when I think Terrace Marshall lives and where he'll find success at the next level for our dynasty fantasy football purposes is I think Terrace Marshall is a very good number 2 wide receiver, right? Like I don't want him to come in and be the number 1 guy. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for him to maybe get drafted in the second round of the NFL draft, somewhere around there, maybe even later to a good team, like a team like Green Bay. Cause I think he's even better on the outside on the second level, getting out to the third level of the field. And to me, I think he's a really good number 2 and seeing defenses like number 2 cornerbacks and living there with a very solid quarterback. I think that's where he's going to strive and offer the most upside for fantasy football potential. So yeah, I don't think he's a number 1 wide receiver or anything like that, but I like his play enough. And I think see the upside enough for that point, that him being a really good number 2 wide receiver.
I'm fine with that.
A guy that could be like, obviously he's not as savvy as a route runner of a guy like Cooper Kupp, but a guy that Cooper Kupp has a 1-year wide receiver 1 finish, right? Like,
sure.
Where Robert Woods to me is definitely the number 1 receiver in that draft. Where Jarvis Landry's had number 1 wide receiver. Well, he was the number 1 wide receiver in those kind of teams. But does that make sense? What I'm kind of saying is like he's the number 2 in that team, but he offers that high-end wide receiver 2 upside for your dynasty fantasy football team for about 3 to 4 years.
I'm totally fine with him as a wide receiver 2 on an NFL team. And I think that's where the disconnect that I've seen a lot on Twitter and things like that lately is he keeps getting pushed up people's boards and above some really, really talented players. I've seen him as high as top 3 in the class for some people. Oh, yeah. And I think he's a wide receiver 2 on an NFL team, and I think he's a wide receiver 3 for fantasy football. Like I don't think he's special. And I see a lot of mocks that have him at the end of the first round or very, very beginning of the second round. And, I'm thinking about guys last year. Now, granted, last year was a legendary class, but we were looking at T. Higgins and Michael Pittman Jr. in that range, to Terrace Marshall. Like, no, like he needs to be more towards the end of the second. I wouldn't want to take him personally till the beginning of the third for an NFL draft. And he's probably more a second round guy in my Dynasty League rookie drafts.
Yeah, I have in the very back end of my first. And you're right. Last year's rookie class is to me is significantly better than this year's rookie class. Especially
that tier 2.
Yeah, you're right. The tier 2 was because this tier 1 to me, it's a locked in tier 1 to me. And that is, it's almost not even a locked in tier 1 because you have Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith right there. Those guys to me are 1-2 week in, week out.
Yep.
Either way you want to go it. And then you have Jaylen Waddle, Rashad Bateman, and Elijah Moore. For me personally, those guys right there, however you want to take them, I have no debate over it whatsoever. And then after that, that's when you take a step
That's where
down.
the fall off is.
Yeah,
yep.
That's when you get to Rondale Moore.
See, I have more up there.
Marshall. That's for me when you get to Nico Collins. I have Nico Collins probably higher than anybody else in Dynasty community because I have Nico Collins. I honestly have Nico Collins right up there for fantasy with Rondale Moore. Honestly, I have him right there. So for me, I think there's a big step down compared to last year. We had a couple steps, but they're all small step downs. Like you weren't like taking these big steps as you kept taking them to the next tier. This to me, you got tier 1, tier 2, and it's like, oh, hello, tier 3. I almost fell. Is that a garage door?
There are big drop offs. I'm totally with you there. And that's what I meant when I said, Terrace Marshall's up because I'm just not that high on a lot of other people. It's not because I love him and I think he's like amazing. I think he offers some upside. So I'm gonna boost him up above some of these guys that I don't overly like that much.
And some of them are gonna hit. Like I like guys, Austin Watkins. We talked about. We liked him. Like I like Amari Rodgers. That's I guess somebody who offers upside. They're all right there in that bubble for me. It's like, okay, where are they going to land? I can see these guys. I can see these guys jumping each other just by the NFL draft, right? Like, oh, look where Amari Rodgers ended up. Look at Austin Watkins got drafted higher than we thought he would. Look at us.
Oh, I'd be so happy.
So it's exciting. And we'll have way more clarity on all of this after the NFL draft, which is some people like, oh, nice cheap way out. It's like, no, dude, like who doesn't readjust their board after an NFL draft? You have to do it. It's not, you have to do it. Otherwise you're going to draft Leonte Carew way too high. And look how that panned out. Leonte Carew, more like Leonte who? Yeah, exactly. Nobody even knows who the hell I'm talking about. Let's move on. Seth Williams, Auburn, wide receiver, 6'3", 211 pounds. If you're looking for a guy that looks like a stud wide receiver, Seth Williams is your man. This is a guy, when you put him in the red zone, he's going to jump up. He's going to get that ball. He's a former all-state basketball player. And when he's in that red zone, he looks like an all-state basketball player because he'll get up, he'll box out. He's going to come down with that football. He's in really good hands.
37-inch vertical. Watch out.
Well, look, is this Michael Jordan? No, it's Seth Williams that we're talking about. He's not afraid to play over the middle. This is a guy that, again, very big wingspan, good catch radius, strong hands.
81-inch wingspan, 81 and an eighth inch.
All right. So that's all my good stuff I got to say about Seth Williams. Dominates in the red zone, dominates as a possession receiver over the receiver. Now, when you talk about the bad things, this is a guy, his route run-ins are very lazy to me. He runs lazy routes, pretty much has type hits, gets out of his breaks very not fast, well. I guess. Doesn't have the deep speed, didn't produce against these high-end teams like when he played Alabama, all the SEC. When he played those guys, he didn't produce much at all. This is a guy who's not very quick off the line. His burst is okay. His routes are okay. I think he offers he's very one-dimensional in my eyes. And when you look at him, he's a very pretty wide receiver to look at. But when you talk about these receivers, Garrett, when you watch another receiver out of the same school, Darius Slayton, right? You're like, oh, I like this guy. This guy offers fantasy football upside.
Yep.
I just, when I watch Seth Williams, I want to like him. I feel like he's a player, he could have some success if he could put his act together and try a lot harder, right?
Yep.
If he really wants to put together, because it seems to me I know we were talking earlier before the show, and Jared was he just seems lazy to me. I'm yes, that's the word I want to use. He seems lazy at times at playing fantasy or football. But this is a guy, if he put together, he could be an Allen Robinson. You know what I mean? He's that kind of player. But if you were you had a gun to my head and you're Rich, will Seth Williams be a good NFL player? I'd be no. No.
I feel there's one way that he's like Allen Robinson, and it's because he's 6'3", 211 pounds. And
that's what I'm saying. He looks like Allen.
Basically it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
That is
and in the red zone, he looks good.
Okay.
Wear similar colors as the Bears,
Right. Auburn and the Bears.
That's where he got me.
Yep.
That's where he got me.
That's where he got you.
Trickster.
I don't know. For me, this feels like another one of these Auburn guys that just really can't play football or doesn't care about football enough. I don't know. That whole school, I feel like they bring in fantastic athletes. They just, none of them know how to play football. And Seth Williams, I think he can actually kind of play. I don't think he gives a crap though. So like you were saying,
Right.
Guys get their hands
lazy, right?
Yeah. And for a guy that's 6'3", 211 pounds, he doesn't play physical enough. If a guy gets his hands on him, I feel like he struggles to get off the line a bit. He's inconsistent in a lot of areas, in his route running, in his catching. I don't know. He's a guy that I'm not going to be in on anywhere. Sure, if Seth Williams is hanging around the 5th round, I'll take a flyer on him, but there's no way he's going to be.
I would probably, in the right land spot, I would take him in the 3rd round if he was in the right spot. But I feel like this year's draft in the 3rd round, I'm taking all running backs. If I pick 3-1 or 3-10, it's all
the upside guys.
Tight end, tight end.
Jared Patterson,
Trace
Hill,
Elijah Mitchell, all those guys. Where are they at? Give me whoever's left over. I love Elijah Herbert just keeps rising.
Elijah Herbert.
You're
just making up running backs
Khalil
now.
Herbert. Sorry.
Khalil.
I'm thinking about
I nodded and I went,
and
went, wait a minute.
Elijah Moore coming to my next show. No,
but anyway, and that's what I meant by 5th round, because I don't know. I feel like there's higher upside guys at different positions than a lot of these wide receivers that I just don't see a lot from.
Yeah,
a lot of these guys are just fading into one big blob for me, and it's not a good blob.
Yeah, it's like your you're constipated. That's what this blob is. It just gets you constipated, and you just want to get out of your system, but you can't because it's digging into your whatever that is out there. Your intestines.
So
let's move on from that analogy.
They're going to be free. It's like who's that Scottish man? Braveheart begging for freedom out there. But because this class was supposed to be like a really strong receiver class, right? That was the whole hype of this class. And now that we're done with the class, it's like I would just rather gamble on like all these running backs that are coming into this draft. There's some really good, like there's some upside there at the running back. Like nobody like blows your doors off, but they blow your doors off better than some of these average receivers in such a crowded mass of influx of young talent we've seen. It's like, well, a lot of the talent that's come in the draft over the last 3 years is better than the second half guys that are coming in this year, I guess. It's just a lot of guys, not a lot of talent.
You done?
I don't know.
Just start talking again. He'll cut you off. Just go ahead.
I'm done. I saw the kernels.
So Seth Williams got a 68.18 for me, which is kind of far down the list to count, but somewhere in like the 17 to 20 range, which is not that exciting for me. We actually did a Film Nerds on Seth Williams and Sage Surratt, who we'll talk about in the next show. And
talk about Turd Ferguson.
Yeah, the reason we did those two guys because there were a lot of mock drafts, guys. I believe it was Matt Miller had both Sage Surratt and Seth Williams before the season in the first round of NFL mock drafts. And we were like, all right, well, let's watch the tape. And we watched and we were like, I would be surprised if they went in the third. Like we just were really, really underwhelmed. And I'll get to Sage Surratt next episode, but that was something we saw. There was a lot of times where he just took plays off. He just seemed like he was kind of elsewhere. For somebody that is so big and can make some really, really awesome plays at times. But then, he doesn't actually track the ball very well. So he doesn't always time up his route with the ball coming down the field. It's almost like he loses track of it at times. It was kind of weird. Very, very little yards after the catch. His top speed is okay, but it takes him a little while to get to that top speed. So I'm kind of out on Seth Williams. There could be a team that could see him and say, there's enough here physically that give us 2 years to mold this guy. And then maybe he can turn into something. And, you could see this big transformation in a few seasons, but I can't draft hoping that that's going to happen. So for right now, unless he's falling, fourth round or later, I'm just probably out.
Yeah. It's funny. You mentioned like his speed doesn't love you. It was weird because I was reading like other people's scouting reports on Seth Williams to see what they had to say about him. I always check after I do my analysis, I check other people's reports too, in case I missed something I maybe didn't see on film. And I saw a couple people talking about like, oh, they liked his speed. I'm like, what speed? Like what?
It takes him a while to like the top speed's okay, but it takes him a while to get there, and he's not going to have that kind of time at the NFL level.
No, I said, I mean, that's why I started off strong with his red zone ability because he looked really good there.
That's where he wins.
Yeah,
that's where he wins.
He looked really good there, and that was about it. So, all right, let's move on. But before we move on, let's talk about Reality Sports Online, realitysportsonline.com. What is that, you may ask? It's only the #1 auction site in the world to play Dynasty Fantasy Football. If you're looking for a salary cap league, an auction website, Reality Sports Online is your go-to site. And right now, you can save 10% with the promo code NERDS at Reality Sports Online right now. So right now, this is a platform where owners can build and manage their fantasy football teams like an NFL general manager. But this gives you an opportunity to get into an auction league that is run smoothly and efficiently. Free agency, multi-year contracts, rookie drafts, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and so much more. If you think this is very complicated, it's not. Reality Sports Online makes it so easy for you. And the best thing about Reality Sports Online fantasy front office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires a little bit more strategy. think you're among the fantasy elite like us? Well, not like us, but like some of us. Wink, wink. This platform is just for you. And right now, if you want to test it out, go to Reality Sports Online right now. They have a mock free agency auction waiting for you right now. You can try for absolutely free. Give it a whirl, see it's for you. There's tons of people out there that live by auction fantasy football, and this is the number one website in the world to offer that. Use that promo code NERDS to get 10% off of your team or your entire league today.
All right. Now, guys, I want to tell you, I finally invested in Doge this week, so I'm fully expecting that to tank and be absolutely nothing here within the week because
high.
What's that?
What are you getting real high?
I got in when it was at 33 cents. So
my brother got in at 3 cents. He thinks he's the smartest man in the world.
Sounds pretty smart at the moment.
I think Elon Musk, buddy.
Yeah, I know, right? I need him to pump it up a little more. It's been a couple weeks. So, but I should probably invest more in something I know a little bit more about. And that's what you can do over at predictionstrike.com. There is a guy that we're going to talk about next. That is a great investment because, yeah, he's going to be super cheap and he might go away. Or he could be one of the biggest boom prospects in the class. We'll talk about him right after this. But he's the type of guy that I would want to buy on predictionstrike.com. It lets you get players, athletes, and use them just like shares in a stock market. Buy, sell, try to buy low, sell high, all of that kind of stuff at predictionstrike.com. They have a great website. They have an incredible app. And best of all, with our promo code Dynasty, you can receive 10 free dollars with your first deposit of $20 or more. That's promo code Dynasty to receive $10 with your first deposit of $20 or more over at Prediction Strike.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about another receiver here. This one out of Florida State. We're talking about Tamorrion Terry, 6'3", 207 pounds. Another guy who opted out early in November. Now, he opted out. He could say it was COVID, but I believe he opted out. Well, obviously, he was having knee issues. He had to get a little small surgery to clean that up, and his quarterback sucked. So, I mean, this is, for me, it was an easy decision for him.
Well, there's a little controversy around why he opted out, too, just to interject real quick.
Oh, interject. I would never do that.
I know, right? So he had some issues with his new head coach I believe it was Mike Norvell, at the beginning of spring camp. Him and a couple other players voiced concerns over how he was handling COVID. There's all this hoopla around it. And then come at that point in the season, some people said he was dismissed from the team. Other people say that he left on his own. There's like a lot of really gray area about what happened exactly there. But we know that there was controversy with him, the head coach, all the way back in the spring.
Well, we should call Maury Povich and get to the bottom of this.
We should
do some DNA testing because I would like to know the answer. I mean, this is a guy who probably really regrets not coming out last year.
Yes.
He looked really good in 2019. His 2020 tape's not terrible, but his 2019 tape looks way better than his 2020 tape. And this is a guy who is he leaves as a 10th all-time receiver at Florida State. So, I mean, he's somebody that comes in, he was productive while at Florida State. A guy who at 207 pounds, 6'3", he looks really skinny, but he does offer he plays stronger than he looks, I guess the best way to put it. Really good size, really good speeds, really good yard after the catch kind of wide receiver as well.
Yep.
Some of the way he catches the ball is, his hands aren't like the greatest at times.
He has inconsistency issues there.
Yep. He does.
Inconsistency. He holds a record. I saw this. He holds a record with 5 touchdowns of 70+ yards and 9 over 50 yards, really, which is, it's crazy. So he just shows you right there, he's a big time player. And this is a guy who, again, he's real skinny, but he could play through tough contacts. I saw when the defensive backs were being physical with him, he could play through that. I mean, this guy could get the ball and he's gone. If you give any kind of open coverage there, like a quick slant, he'll go. I mean, he showed he has really good vision on the field, pretty solid hands at times, but it said it was hit and miss sometimes the way he catches the football. But he really needs to improve his route tree because even though he's explosive, I mean, he didn't run a vast route tree at Florida State. I mean, mostly ran go routes and screens. Everything else was very basic, like a couple.
He ran a couple double moves and stuff like that. Got kind of wide ass open on those. And
I mean, a sluggo's. I mean, you don't think a sluggo is the most common route?
No, I do. I'm just saying. I mean, there's more than just go
sluggo.
though. I mean, there's people that are just go guys, and I don't think he should be labeled as that. I think he's pretty sudden in and out of his breaks. I do think he needs to, diversify and work on some things there and his route running. It was the inconsistency with the hands, and I think that was his biggest weakness. But I mean, obviously, overall, this year was such a big drop off as well. I'm glad you pointed out that all the COVID stuff, Garrett, because that I think goes a long way to explain the huge drop off in his production. I mean, if a guy's in the doghouse, the prior year he had 60 receptions, almost 1,200 yards, and now in this 6-game shortened season, he only got 23 receptions for 289 yards. So that's a pretty big drop off in production from one year to the next. But I mean, I like him. He's definitely I think he's got huge upside, but he's got to put some things together, become a more consistent player to kind of reach his potential. So where does that land him? I mean, I could see him being like a 3rd or 4th round draft pick in the NFL, kind of just based off that upside. And, once you're there, you have to work your way kind of into a spot, I feel like.
Sure.
So if he doesn't prove himself there, he's one of these guys that could just be gone. And you never hear from him again, but he could also earn a spot and become a starter. And therefore, he's in the wide receiver 3, I think, conversation immediately. So I think he has wide receiver 2 upside. I don't think he's ever going to be good enough to be like a wide receiver 1 type of guy.
Hands aren't good enough.
No, I don't think so. So that's kind of how I see Tamorrion Terry. Best case, worst case scenario.
Yeah. Tamorrion Terry is a wild athlete. Like, he's just such a good athlete. He moves really well for a guy of his size, not just the straight line, but he's got some wiggle to his game, yards after catcher there. There's a lot of things about Tamorrion Terry I like. And coming into the season, he was in the top 5 of the class for me for wide receivers. And it was easier because you saw the huge production and things like that. But there are some of the, is there, I can't say there's off the field stuff because nothing's been proven either way. It sounds like it was more of a coach thing because a lot of players were coming out and saying stuff about the coach, but it's hard to say. Anytime a guy leaves on bad terms, that's always weird. I think that's the best way to say it.
Puts up a red flag.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, there's some of that, but he is a very raw player. We see some of these other guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's just, everything's just tight and everything. Everything's polished. Tamorrion Terry's just not polished at all. Like, he's a freak athlete that, I mean, athletic ability wise, we're talking about, he's in a similar class to what we saw from like Chase Claypool last year. He could easily be one of those type of players. Will he put it all together at the next level? No clue. So if you wanted to take him at the tail end of your 2nd round or the beginning of your 3rd round on pure upside, I have no issue with it. Just know that you could be lighting that pick on fire. It could be, he has the widest range of outcomes in the class, I think, by a wide margin.
Yeah, very low floor, very, very fun ceiling. I guess I won't say high ceiling, but like
I think it's pretty high.
I'm with Matt. Like, I don't ever see him be a wide receiver 1. I don't think he has a skill set to ever be a wide receiver 1. I think he offers, like Matt said, I think his ceiling is he offers some wide receiver 2-year upsides. I mean, I
think he could be Chase Claypool. I mean, I see a lot of similarities between the two.
He can't go up and get the ball. Like
him.
Chase was like a guy that could dominate over the top of defenders, and I just don't see that in Tamorrion Terry. He doesn't go up and get the ball. He's not that kind of wide receiver.
No, he's not a huge contested catch guy. You're correct in that. But I think he is just as fast, and I think he's more elusive in the open field.
Yeah, I really like his vision a lot. Like I like that his larger to the catch. To me, it just boils down to his hand. Like, I think what just hinders me, and this is the thing that we don't see a lot of people taking it to another level. Like, that doesn't translate to the NFL. Like, when we ask players to do this, we don't see it happen very often. Is we need his hands to be a little bit more consistent, and he needs to be a better route runner. The route runner, you obviously could become a better route runner.
Mhm.
But and the problem wasn't even just some of his routes. What I saw too, it's like even like get in and out of his breaks. It's like he had to think about it. Like he would like for a fast guy, like he'd lose some speed getting out of his breaks. And for me, and I'm not demoralizing him here at all because I like him at the back end of the second, third round too. I think I don't hate the guy because he does offer some upside, but you're right. Such a low floor. Like you
Sure.
said, you could light this pick on fire, but I don't see that wide receiver 1 upside at all. Personally, I
don't, but I could see wide receiver 2. I think he could live there potentially.
I mean, if you're talking, Tamorrion Terry or Seth Williams, for me, it's Tamorrion Terry.
Oh,
yeah, by a lot. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. I think we're on the same page there.
And the more like you mentioned names, Garrett, and just more Seth. I said, back end of the second, or in the third round, I would take him. You're mentioning guys I forgot about. Like, another drop down. Yeah, I would take Tamorrion Terry over Seth Williams every single time. And there's a couple receivers we're talking about. Well, literally just a couple that would also take over Seth Williams as well. So, but at least Tamorrion Terry does. A guy who's big, a guy who's fast, a guy who has really good vision, a guy that in today's NFL you could hit with a quick slant, who could take it to the house every single time. That's what I like. But I mean, you can only run that quick slant so many times. You know what I mean? Before defensive coordinators are going to shut it down, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, where else is he going to expand his game? That's what worries me about Tamorrion Terry. But I'm with you, Garrett. I do like his upside of fantasy football potential. It's just I think Tamorrion Terry is one of those guys. Like, if he hits, is like you like him as your wide receiver 4. That's where I like him at.
Sure. The one place I really want to, every time I do a mock, I always in like the third round send him to the Chiefs because I just think he would be so much fun there, and they could use a guy with a little bit of size.
I know, but I guess they can use a size there. They have Travis right now, and let's say speed wise, they have they got Mecole Hardman.
I think they're just going to stick with it. Just if you don't run a sub 4.45, you can't be on our team.
He just makes the cut 4.44.
Yeah,
nice.
He fits that system. Let's move on to the next guy, Dazz Newsome, 5'10", 190 pounds. For me, this is a guy who is a slot receiver.
He's a slot wide receiver. He was a former cornerback, I think, coming in to North Carolina. He was like the number 1 recruit coming out of Virginia, I think, that year as cornerback. But he's a slot guy. I think, he's a punt returner, so he makes people miss in the open field. I think he was pretty sharp in and out of cuts. He doesn't have a ton of upside though. He's a 4.59 type of guy. He's fast enough. If he gets into the right system where he's getting fed the ball a ton, he could be a wide receiver 3, maybe 4, most likely. But he would have to be like a Jamison Crowder. You know what I mean? Like he could do that. Okay. And if he got 150 targets, he could convert 100 of them to
be a wide receiver 3.
To be a wide receiver 3. Yeah, like that's how I see
150 targets. I really like.
Hey, stranger things have happened. That's all I'm saying.
I think he's somebody that is a very solid college receiver, right? Like what he does at the college level works. What he does will not work at the next level. The guy can stop and go very well, right? Mm-hmm. Like he has really quick feet, but like he's not even tricking college defensive backs, like let alone NFL defensive backs. To me, sometimes like he almost moves too much. You know what I mean? Like it's like, hey, buddy, why don't you go run your route? Something gets a little too fancy pants, and
right. And everything he did was close to the line of scrimmage. He's not going to beat you over the top. He just doesn't have the speed for it. So, and he's not big. 5'10", 190 pounds. And if you're that size in the NFL and you don't blaze, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to have to really earn everything you get. And you'd have to be special as a route runner, I think, in order to gain separation. And I don't think he's special. Does he have room to grow? Maybe. Maybe he's a lot of energy. He's a converted cornerback. Maybe he does have a little bit of room to grow and become a little bit better route runner. But he's going to take some time to develop, I think, I think he'll make an NFL team. I think he's good enough to be on an NFL team. I struggle to find where he's going to help your dynasty team much.
Yeah, that's
yep.
Like not knock on him. I think he's a solid college player. I don't think he helps your dynasty team at all.
Yeah, I think he's a good like depth player on an NFL team, a fourth or fifth receiver on an NFL team, and I think he seems like a guy that tries to do all the little things right. You see him even out there, even though he's not very big, really trying to put his nose in there in the run blocking, trying to do all the little things right. And they use some gadgety stuff to try to get him involved in, and he would make plays, but he still wasn't making a ton of plays downfield. It was mostly closer to the line of scrimmage stuff, but he is pretty quick. He's definitely quicker than fast. And you saw him make some plays because of that. He came in with a 72 flat for me. But this is one of those scenarios where his score probably even ended up a little bit higher than I would actually draft him, just because there weren't a lot of things to say like, this was terrible. And, I could like really nerf the score there. He was okay enough in a lot of areas that it kind of helped level things out for him. But you guys are absolutely right. Like, I just can't ever imagine wanting to start a Dazz Newsome on my fantasy football team.
You could do much, much better. I think
he's going to be a great special teams player.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great call, Jared, because he has a lot of tenacity. He's very feisty. Like he's a high energy guy. Like you said, to get his nose in the piles. Like, yeah, I can envision him being a very solid special teams player. That's a good call. But that's it. Nobody you're ever going to start in your dynasty roster. Let's talk about the last guy of the show here. Let's talk about TJ Vasher out of Texas Tech, 6'6", 203 pounds. And unlike most receivers that come to the NFL that are 6'6", they're probably not going to pan out. This is a guy.
True, man.
He's got really long arms. He's got a really big wingspan. He's
84 and 3/8 inches. 84 and 3/8. It's crazy.
That is crazy. This guy was a Division I basketball prospect.
37-inch vertical.
You can tell.
Yeah, you definitely can tell.
Comes from pedigree. His uncle was Nathan Vasher, former quarterback, I believe. Was that for the Titans? I think he was.
Bears, I think.
Bears. Okay. So it comes from pedigree, but when you watch the kid play, he has no play strength whatsoever.
None.
His speed is subpar. And like for him to run his routes, because how tall he is, he literally has to like stop to get in and out of his breaks. I don't know, man. His hands aren't even that great either.
He can go up and get the ball though.
He can make the spectacular play.
He doesn't have to jump. He just puts his hands up like, I got it. But that's it. That's it. The way he plays football with his size and what he brings to the table, I barely don't even see him make an NFL roster.
Unfortunately, he's too tall and skinny. He doesn't play with great leverage. The one thing that he can do is, I think, be bigger than everybody and jump over them. That's
the one thing you can do is be bigger.
Like who's going to be out there in the defensive backfield that's 6'6"? Nobody. And
you can barely get an offensive lineman at that height.
Exactly.
It's Joe Hayden on Denzel Ward's shoulders.
That would be the way to cover him, I guess.
And they probably keep up with him.
They probably could. You're right. So yeah, I don't know. He's one of these guys that I think, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, there would have been a probably a bigger role for him in the NFL than there is nowadays. And there's not a big spot for him. 6'6" guy that's 203 pounds anymore.
There's going to be guys that we did not mention during our whole rookie breakdowns. They're going to leap above a guy like TJ Vasher, right? Yeah. Guys that we haven't even discussed that the NFL draft is going to propel ahead of guy TJ Vasher. This is a guy that you literally take with your last pick in the draft just because you remember his name.
I have him with a grade of 55.35. Which is
Lord, that's terrible.
Which is literally the lowest score in the class, and that was even getting boosted by having a 9.5 catch radius.
Because he's so tall.
Because he's so tall.
His long arms are so long too. It's crazy.
So yeah, I am all the way out.
He's got 10 and a quarter inch hands also. So it just keeps getting everything. He can grab.
The crazy part is he's also a 5th year senior.
Yes, he is.
And with that 5th year, he got a total of 200 yards.
Oh.
227.
I would draft a kicker over him in a no kicker league.
Like he's just long. That's it. He's just
That's it.
long.
He's just bigger than everyone. That's it.
Yeah. I'm taking Drew Brees. He just retired. I'd still rather have him.
You're saying there's a chance.
There's some name notoriety there.
Yeah.
Julian Edelman. He could come back.
Well, if you
Never
think
know.
TJ Vasher is bad, wait your turn the next show. We got a couple more guys that are up his alley.
Ooh. There's some
but
good
we
ones
are
in there, but
We
there's
are going to
some
talk
really
about
bad.
Elijah Moore.
Yes.
And this guy is a top 5 dynasty prospect for sure. And I can't wait to get into him. We're going to close out our rookie content in our next show, the Nerd Herd episode. If you're not a member of the Nerd Herd, what are you waiting for? Get out there. And I saw a tweet out there, a non-solicited tweet today saying, hey, but guys, like, if you're in more than 5 dynasty leagues and you're not using Dynasty GM, you're doing it wrong. There's no tool in the market today better than Dynasty GM that's going to help manage your offseason. You know, the summer is meant after this NFL draft. I mentioned you have a lot of free time on your hands. What are you going to do? It's about evaluating your dynasty rosters. And of course, that's real easy to do, you know, when you have 1 dynasty league, 2 dynasty leagues. But who wants to do that? There's no fun in that. You want to play in multiple dynasty leagues. The Dynasty GM helps you totally manage all that so efficiently and so smoothly and lets you look at your teams from a realistic perspective, which is the hardest thing to do in Dynasty. I think it's one of the biggest challenges in Dynasty fantasy football to play is to look at your team realistically and to look at your team as a whole amongst the rest of your league. It's a really hard thing to do, to always look at yourself and think you're a contender when you're more stuck in the middle. And when you play Dynasty fantasy football, the worst thing you could possibly do is be stuck in the middle. You either win the ship or you're rebuilding with a lot of young talent so you can win multiple ships. And Dynasty GM is going to help you do that. And I'm not going to hear and tell you all the things you could do because I'm just going to ask you to go check it out for free and see what it could do. Get to dynastynerds.com. Click on it. You see it as soon as you get on the website, which has been revamped. Free for 3 days to try it out. Just upload your team. If you play an FFPC, Flea Flicker, Sleeper, MFL, we got ESPN coming soon. We got a lot of different formats coming here to promote your leagues. All you do is enter your league ID. We do the rest of the work for you. If you play in a league that does not we host, you can upload your entire team manually within 10 minutes. This is a tool that I promise once you try it, you're going to love it. And we give you an opportunity to try for free at dynastynerds.com. Check it out. You get so much more. You hear Garrett mention the nerd scores all the time in these rookie breakdowns. You can look at last year's nerd scores and this year's nerd scores. You get our rankings. You get the Dynasty GM. You get the bonus podcast and so much more. And, of course, the Dynasty Nerd Film Room where we watch our film, where you get regular game tapes and all 22 film room access for some of these players as well. Check it out, dynastynerds.com. Try that free trial. And I guarantee you won't miss it. We're going to go into the next show next with the Nerd Herd episode, kicking off with Elijah Moore. I can't wait.
Sounds great, man. I can't wait either. Adios.